When asked to build a watch box, I immediately jumped at the opportunity because I like to try new and different things. When looking at these boxes for sale on the internet, I saw cases this size were upward of $600 and very heavy. So my first thought was, how could a do-it-yourselfer build this box, make it look just as good as the professionals, but at half the cost? Let me show you how I did it. Let's get cutting. For the wood, I spent a total of $35, two 8 feet long 2x4s and two 8 feet long 1x4 select pine. I would start by building the interior of the box. My width of the interior was 20.5 inches, so cut yourself two pieces. My interior length pieces would be 40.5 inches, so make yourself two of these as well. These pieces will go inside the width cuts, so you can add that plus the exterior of the box to get the total dimensions of the box. 42 by 22 was requested. Cut each 2x4 perfectly in half. This will be the height of your display rails. Here's a quick tip. If your wood grabs at your blade, have a screwdriver on hand to keep the cut separated. Once your pieces are cut, set the table saw fence at 3/4 of an inch. Now cut each piece on their side. You should get two pieces out of each cut. Run each piece completely through to ensure each pieces are exact matches. This next step is not really a mistake, but don't make this cut until you know the length of your roll of velvet. I will have to make some adjustments when the velvet arrives, but I will explain that when we get to it. Now take all the pieces you just cut and lay them out. So far, making the cuts ourselves has only cost us $6. We can now begin working on the exterior of the box. Our first cut will be 43.5 inches. You will need to make this cut twice. For this cut, we will be using the select pine. Once these are cut for size, you can begin cutting the ends at 45 degrees. For all my subscribers, this should be familiar. We are just cutting a standard shadow box frame here. If all cuts are correct, your inside angle should align with the interior of the box. With the sides in place, take a measurement from side to side. If all your cuts have been the same as mine, your measurements should be 22 inches even, just like the customer requested. Now, repeat the same process that you just used to make the sides and make the top and bottom pieces. Check your pieces to ensure a proper fit before we move on. Before joining my pieces together, I will cut my backplate rabbet, just like any shadow box. I put on my dado blade and I cut each piece in half and 1/4 of an inch deep. Double check that you are cutting the inside of the pieces. I lay out all my pieces in the correct orientation before I start cutting, so I don't have to give it any thought while the blade is spinning. I am limited in my dado stack, so I actually have to make two quick passes. You can now glue your frame together. The biggest concern here is that you keep your frame square while gluing it together. You will have big problems even if you're slightly off, so keep the square close by. Once your four corners are dry, you can go back and measure from rabbet to rabbet and cut the back plate. For the back plate, I used a lightweight piece of 4 foot by 2 foot piece of birch. This piece cost $13. Take your measurement and then mark your board and take it to the table saw. Check your fit, and if you need to make adjustments, make them now and then move on. Now we can make the faceplate that will act as the door. Take your long ways measurement, which should be 42 inches, and add 2/16 to it. Grab your second piece of select pine and take it to the miter saw. Now the trick I use here is to cut the board at length first. This way, after I rip it into two pieces, both will be identical in length. I take my piece back to the box and check that I have a 1/16 overlap on both the top and the bottom of the box. One of those 1/16 will magically disappear when you glue your door together. It always happens, trust me. Now find the center of your board and take it to the table saw and rip it in half. I run both pieces through to make sure both are the same size. As you can see, my measurement was a little bit off, and the second pass trims it up to match. With the sides of your door complete, you can go back and repeat the same process for the top and bottom of your door. Don't forget to add your 2/16. In the end, it will not hurt to have a door that is a 1/16 of an inch larger than the box, but it will definitely be noticeable if your door is even a 1/16 of an inch smaller. With all sides cut, you can now place your 45-degree angles on all the ends. Go back to the box and check your fit, and then we can proceed with the glass groove. I'm going to just eyeball this, but I want to set my saw blade right around a 1/2 inch. We will be using plexiglass. It might be more expensive than glass, but it will be a fraction of its weight. I'm going to eyeball the center of the board for the middle cut as well, but as long as all your boards are cut at the same time, your measurement is not really that important. Now take one of your long door face plate boards and find the center. We are going to attach the handle. With a mark at the center, place your handle in position and trace out where it makes contact with your board. Then go back and find the center of your traced out areas and place your marks. Place pilot holes in your marks, but let's not attach the handle yet until we're done staining the box. You can find your measurements for the plexiglass by measuring your glass groove you cut on each door panel. Mark your plexiglass and take it to the table saw to cut. If you are a subscriber, I should not have to go into much detail on this because you have seen me do it a million times with each shadow box that we build. Stain your box in whatever color you like. This box is being stained in Minwax black gel stain. I use paper towels. Once that is dry, I go back and put a thin coat of polyurethane over the stain to protect it. For this, I will use a brush. In reality, the next step does not occur for a few days because of COVID-19, Amazon is prioritizing deliveries, and jewelry box velvet is not at the top of their list. Imagine that. But just as a reminder that the stained velvet and the hinge I used to build this box can be found in its description. Once the velvet arrived, I found myself in a dilemma. The velvet was supposed to be 78 inches long, but the problem was that I failed to read that the 78 inches was achieved with two 39-inch pieces. So remember earlier I said if you are following along not to cut your cross internal pieces in half? This is why. I had to go back and cut all my interior long pieces just under 39 inches in order to allow the felt to cover in one piece. This means I would need to extend the cross piece in order to make the long pieces after I cut them match up. Luckily, I make this up as I go along, and I can do this on the fly. So with all my interior pieces cut to just under 39 inches, I can continue to cover them with velvet. If I don't look like I know what I'm doing here, it's because I don't. I'm trying to figure this out. The best way to apply velvet, something here I've never done before. And so follow along, this is what I came up with. I place each board overhanging on the edge of the velvet. Then I lay it down and flip it towards me until I have completely rotated the board. Then I will add a 1/4 inch so it wraps completely around where I started. I make a mark and measure it. From there I use a straight edge, draw out a line, and cut it. Once it's cut, I peel the self-sticking wax paper off the back, and this time I lay the board down and repeat the process I just used, this time pushing hard to ensure contact across the face of the board. I flip the board towards me until all of the board is covered in velvet. Having to repeat this process 8 times, you will get pretty good at it. I had it down to a science by the 3rd piece, so I think this pretty much works. Now to fix my error. Here you can see that my interior pieces are much shorter, but like I said, I make this up as I go along. So here's my quick fix. I cut a matching piece and I will glue those 2 pieces together top and bottom so they match and I get back my lost space. Once dry, I cover in velvet and put back in place. You only have to cover the top and one side this time. Place in position and crisis averted. Now you can go back and insert your plexiglass into your door. I like to leave the protective plastic on the plexiglass until delivery. So in order to get this out of the way, I peel back 2 inches around the perimeter so I don't have to take it all off, and it does not get in the way when sliding the plexiglass into position. Since this is big and awkward, I clamp it down to the workbench so when I slide it in, it does not move on me. The next step is actually twofold. One for the hanging brackets that will be attached to the back, and the second to know where I can hide the velvet cuts under the rails on the back plate. Put your interior pieces in place and make sure they are properly measured out and all are equal distance apart. I use a cheater stick to accomplish this quickly. Once in place, I trace out all of the rails because at this point, I don't know which ones I will hide screws behind or make my velvet seams disappear under. For the hanging bracket, I wanted something that would be secure and keep the box close and aligned to the wall. So I decided that I would use the same technique that I used with my son's headboard. Simple slide-on locking joints. So I grabbed some scrap wood and cut them thin. Next I would make marks 16 inches apart on the brackets and then lay them over my drawn outlines in the box. My objective here is to find 2 rails to hide my screws in that don't conflict with the stud hole marks on the brackets. So lay out your brackets and make your marks. Mark both your brackets and inside the lines of your rails. If you need to use a square to make sure they are 90 degrees, do this now, but I will simply measure from the top of the box down and align the bracket that way. Make sure your marks are inside the center of your rail lines that you traced out earlier. Grab your drill and put a small bit on it and drill out your marks all the way through the back of the box. Then repeat this process to the bottom. The bottom is just a spacer that will allow the box to stay the same distance off the wall, so don't forget that. Now you can mark your positions for the pilot holes on your spacer. Repeat this for the top bracket. Take all your interior parts of the box, which is all your rails, and join them together. I place a board the same width of the rail to give me a guide as to where the center of each pilot hole should be. With one of the outside rails screwed into place, you can use your cheater's board to make all your rails even. Or you can take the time to measure out each one and do the math. The math is just not my forte, so I will use the cheater stick I made earlier. Once all are in place, you can repeat the process of using a board the same width to find the center for each pilot hole. After all the marks are made, you can then drill out each pilot hole for each individual board. Repeat this process to the lower side crossbar, and then you can attach all your rails together. Here is a little trick. After everything is joined, you can go back with a paint scraper and tuck in any velvet that might be out of place. Before we put in our rails, we need to cover the back of the box. Take what's left of your velvet and find the best fit to cover the interior of the back plate. Remember to keep your seams in the lines you traced out around your rails. Where your seams meet inside the traced out area of the rails, it is important that they do not overlap. Don't worry if they don't match up exactly, just make sure that they are completely inside the traced out lines. Okay, it was at this point I almost had a heart attack. With just enough velvet to finish the box, I looked and saw what I thought was a different color velvet on the right side. Even to the naked eye, this looked like a completely different color velvet. It just happened to be the shadow from the side of the box casted perfectly down the seam of the piece we just applied. What are the odds? With the velvet on the back plate, you can now put in your rails. Push them down snug and tight. Your brackets will hold the rails in place once we attach them. Now go back and add a small magnet to your door before we attach it. Drill a small hole the same diameter, top and bottom of the door, and insert your small magnet. I simply use wood glue to hold it in place. Check out this amateur move. I use a steel hammer to attempt to tap in the magnet. Yeah, that worked great, didn't it? Okay, I found the right tool to tap it in. Take the bracket that will go on the wall and drill out pilot holes. They should be 16 inches apart. This will allow your screws to find studs in the wall and have no problems holding the weight of the watches as you fill your box. Place pilot holes over your lower spacer as well. Then go back and drill out a countersink hole so your screw heads will be below the surface of the bracket and not obstructing anything. Find your pilot holes you drilled out earlier and drill back the opposite way. This will keep your pine from splitting if it is not perfectly in the center of the rail. Your next step is to install the hanging brackets on the back. You want to do this before we install the door so we no longer have to turn the box upside down once the door is attached. I don't drill the screws all the way into the pine. I stop just short, then finish putting them in with a screwdriver. This way I can feel how much torque I am applying, so I don't damage any of the wood within the rails. I want them tight, but I don't want to damage anything at this point. Attach your hinge to the box first. For this, I actually had an excuse to buy a tool. Yes, any excuse to buy a new tool, right? This was a hinge centering drill bit. I got 3 different sizes in one set. This will allow your pilot hole to be in the center of the hinge hole. Pretty neat. Again, I use a screwdriver here after I drill my pilot holes, so you can feel how much pressure is being placed on the screw. I intend to stagger every hole and do the opposite holes for the door so no screw heads will be in contact with each other. Place a top and bottom screw in first. Close your door and ensure everything is aligned. If not, make adjustments. Once they're aligned, go back and drill all your remaining pilot holes and screw in the remaining screws. The very last step is to place the reciprocal magnet heads in the frame of the box. You need to close the door and make a mark where the door magnets touch. Then, drill a hole the same depth as the magnet. Use a bit collar if you do not feel confident you can control the depth of your hole. Then, with a dab of glue, glue in your magnet. Wipe away the excess and then repeat this on the other side. Okay, let me show you this trick so you don't find out the hard way. Take your magnet to the door first. Find out which side attracts and then keep your magnet in the same orientation and move it to your frame so your magnets attract and your door closes. It would really suck to have to try to pry out the magnet and damage the box because your magnet is repelling and your door won't close. The hinge leaves a slight gap to the left where it was installed, so I added a small rubber protection bead that will keep the magnet from actually touching, keep the case from slamming, and keep the door the same distance all the way around the box. After this, you're done. Would love to hear your comments below. As always, thanks for watching. Hit that thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe.